We are recording.
The ladies were back on the handball court today. The ladies were back on the handball court today, and the Brazilian women picked up right where they left off, but forgot to tell the Hungarians not to spoil the ending. Korea succumbed to Slovenia, perhaps still feeling the effects of their 1-point loss the day before. Sweden became the first team to clinch a position in the knockout rounds, while Angola provided the biggest shock of the competition, and France performed as expected against its neighbor, Netherlands. All this and a peek at the betting lines for tomorrow's men's games as we settle in at the American Handball Haus.
Thanks very much, guys. We'll go through the games one by one, starting with the first game, which was a Group B game today. That was Hungary, Brazil, the first game. Brazil was leading for much of the game, but Hungary hung on, showing some character, and claimed the opening win in this competition as Petra Simone scored the winner with just 5 seconds left to win 25-24. And we advance to our next game, Slovenia versus Korea, with Slovenia coming out on top by 13, and they raced to a lead 23-12 at half, led by Tamara Mavzar with 7. Bitna Wu had 7 for Korea, but Korea, I guess, perhaps still stinging from their 1-point loss to Germany, just didn't have enough left in the tank and went down pretty hard. In the next game, Sweden versus Germany, Sweden is now the first team to score 2 wins and qualify for the knockout round, it looks like, with an excellent overall performance against Germany. And Germany, of course, the home for handball, now with 2 losses in their Group B. Group A. Let me advance to our next game, and that's Norway versus Denmark. And Norway looks pretty awesome, beating Denmark, their Scandinavian neighbor, 28-17, really making a statement after a first day loss against Sweden. This is Denmark's largest loss in the history of their Olympic competition, beating the previous record by 6 goals. And we move now to our next game, Spain and Angola. And I have this game wrong up here. This was not 25-24. I apologize. I'm not quite sure how this got up there, but this game was won by Angola 26-21, and one of the bigger shocks. Not quite sure how I messed up on that one. Let's see if I can straighten out my record for the last game, and that's a game a lot of us watched today, France versus Netherlands. And France now joins Sweden with 2 victories in their group. That's Group B. So a couple of typos here for the big old guy. But I did get the score right, at least 32-28. And they're in command in Group B. Actually, I do think I have that right, Group A. So maybe you guys can straighten that out as I look for relief. Back to you guys.
a beatdown as beatdowns come. I mean, Denmark couldn't get anything going on offense. They looked slow. They looked lethargic. They looked like me out there on the court, really. Quite frankly, sad. If you're the Danish women, you gotta reset and refocus and just.
Which is frustrating after their first.
They are very attuned to what happened.
They'll move on, so I would not be too concerned. Again, Norway.
That I said yesterday that Brazil, and without any irony, had to be very hungry for a win. And I think they came out there showing their stuff, and I think Hungary is just a bit better today. But I think it was an excellent handball game.
Yeah, so both those two teams will be very competitive here in Group B. I think maybe not compete with France, but
that we can give it a little boost.
Excellent. So we had, I think, one of your teammates on, and fellow Wisconsinite, Dennis Burkholz, on earlier in our show's editions. He told some great stories from the Army Champs days. Tell us one of your favorite moments from your time with U.S. Team Handball.
Well, I'll tell you a story. It's a little embarrassing, but it's kind of a good one. We were over in Germany, and I happened to be Catholic, and I felt like I needed to go to confession. And I asked the hotel manager if there was a Catholic church nearby, and in his limited English, he said, yes, 2 blocks that way. So I started walking, and it ended up being 3 miles.
Oh, geez, Louise.
I kept thinking it was at the next corner. Well, anyway, long story short, I go to confession. I head back to the motel because we have a game later that evening. And I get back to the hotel, and the guy goes, hey, your team just left. And so the bus had left for the game. And so now I had to try and find out. I didn't know where the game was at. And the guy at the place didn't either. So we got a taxi cab driver who spoke English. He said, oh, it's at the sports stadium. I know where that is. I'll take you there. So he got me there at halftime. And so I was in a little trouble with Coach Buning. And he said, I'm thinking I should send you back. This is really a bad violation. I know you were hooked up with some German Fräulein. And I'm trying to tell him, no, I went to church.
I went to church.
He's laughing at me. So he says, okay, we're going to go to Paris, France for our next game. And you're going to be suspended for the first game. Okay, I can handle that a lot better than being sent home.
Yeah.
Get to Paris, and on the plane over, I had met an Australian art teacher. She had the plane had been a really bumpy ride, and she was across the aisle from where I was sitting. She says, "Do you mind if I sit next to you? I'm really scared." So she did. We get to Paris, they have the game, there's a banquet afterwards, and I didn't play. And so their coach asked our coach, "How come that tall guy didn't play?" And he says, "Oh, he was in Germany with a Fraulein. I had to suspend him." And his coach goes, "Oh, an American lover." And I didn't know any of this was going on. But anyway, they have the dinner and they have a dais up there and they're introducing and talking about the games. And then this French coach interrupts the whole thing and says to the audience of maybe 150 people that were there, "They have an American lover." And he makes me stand up and come up and talks about how I was with this Fraulein in Germany. So I got disciplined, but I also kind of got the last laugh because our coach was a little bit upset that I got something good out of it.
Yeah. Oh my
Terry,
goodness.
I'll tell you, you would fit well on our Ohio State Columbus teams.
Yeah.
Well, I
thought
feel
it was-
obliged to point out at this juncture that not only is Terry a good church-going man who managed to come across with a reputation as the lover on the team. I don't know how you managed to do that, but that's a great trick. But
Only that one time.
he's also the man who is most responsible for putting the 1972 men's national team, the so-called Army Champs team, which was a team that was almost exclusively made up of guys in the Army on orders from General William Westmoreland. This team that had almost never even heard of, in most cases, the sport of team handball. Terry's the guy who, in the second half, scored 5 goals against Canada and put them literally almost single-handedly in the Olympics. And so he's quite the legend of the sport. Tell us.
We are well aware, Mark.
So tell us.
Terry is a legend for that. And I mean, if you look at USA Handball since, Terry probably had the highest achievement of USA Handball ever.
Well, certainly one of them. Terry, tell us a little bit about where you were in the Army and how you found out about handball.
I had been sent to Fort Gordon, Georgia to be in MP training. And when I arrived, the captain that was the head of the MP training school noticed on my, whatever your papers are, your transfer papers, that I had played basketball at Marquette for a little while. And he was a big Al McGuire Marquette fan. So he called me into his office and asked me if I'd be interested in trying out for the Fort Gordon basketball team, which is part of the 5th Army. And I said, sure. So anyway, I tried out, I did make the team, and at the end of the season, we played in a tournament at Fort Benning, which is significant for 2 reasons. Anyway, at that tournament, the Team Handball Federation sent a couple of players down, and they gave us a workshop for 2 days on how to play team handball. And as Mark said, most of us had never even heard of the game. And I had a very good throwing arm. I could throw a football about 80 yards and was clock throwing the team handball over 90 miles an hour at one time. But anyway, I had a good throwing arm. And I liked physicality. I also played football. Anyway, after we got the workshop, they made us play. Everybody we played in basketball, we had to play in team handball. And because I had this good throwing arm and nobody really knew how to play the game, I scored like 20 goals in one game. And so whoever the scouts were said, hey, how would you like to come and try out for the national team? And the second reason it was significant is Fort Benning, the trial of the My Lai massacre was going on, William Calley. And I kind of was questioning Vietnam because of things that I was hearing and things that were going on in the Army. And then that trial really put it into my mind. It became an issue for me. So anyway, I said no to the invitation and finished up MP training school, and then got sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina to train for custodial corrections. And while I was there, I also heard some more things about, like in Vietnam, if you got attacked, you couldn't shoot back without getting permission team, they were more than likely going to go back to duty, and some of them would have ended up in Vietnam. So it became a big issue. So anyway, that being said, when I was at Fort Jackson, the guy that had recruited me at Fort Gordon to come to the handball team was at Fort Jackson for some reason, and we ran into each other surreptitiously. And he said, "Are you sure you don't want to come?" And so at that point, I had done some praying, and I said, "Yeah, I think things have changed. I'd like to give it a shot." So then I went up to Fort Balfour, where they had a big training session go on with like 150 players. And just as they made the cut downs, I was making them, and progressed forward until they finally chose a team.
Wow.
That's awesome.
This is a
What a
crazy
story.
ride. Like, how many people, when you say the cut downs, like, I'm just thinking, in today's situation, I know West Point's probably the only team that can truly discuss about making cuts, but how many people would you say tried out for these programs?
Well, across the board, I have no idea, because
Okay.
Mark said Westmoreland gave him permission to go in the Army and look for athletes. So I know they did a lot of that. But by the time it got to Balfour, it was down to 150 players. Most of them were out of the Army. There were some kids that played in immigrant leagues on the coasts, and then a lot of kids from the Delphi University team.
Yeah.
And plus, before that, the tryout that Rico had gone to at Fort Bragg, which was about a year or 6 months before that, maybe, or a year before it.
It was about a year is what I heard, but I don't know.
Right, I think it was about a year, where they got the original 7 that they called themselves. That was about 120 guys.
Man.
That's more than we have playing handball right now.
Right.
Just for reference.
That's a significant point, because the original 7, and then the people that came later, once it got down to like the final 25 that they were going to choose a national team from, there was always a little, I wouldn't say abrasiveness or animosity, but a little distance between that group and the new guys coming in. And as we go on, maybe later that'll come up a little bit more, but they were definitely the veterans in a sport that everybody was kind of new to.
Yeah, and that's where, like, how long from when you kind of made that team to your infamous showdown in Elkhart, Indiana? What was the time frame on that?
I believe that Balfour was in the summer of '71. I'm not sure if it was July or August, but it was pretty hot, so it was later in the summer. It wasn't in June. And so Elkhart was in February of '72.
Okay.
In between, there was a lot of playing here, but we did get 2 trips overseas during that time where we could play some stiffer competition, because as we progressed, we kind of outstripped the teams that were here in the United States.
Totally understand that.
Just because we got to move on, Terry, one last question for you. Tell us a little bit about your decision to leave the team, and because we know you did not end up going to the Olympics, you're responsible for putting the team there, but you did not march in the opening ceremony. What was that decision all about?
Well, real quickly, I just want to say one thing. They brought over a coach from Germany named Bernhard Kemper during our training, especially towards the end when they had the national team. He was very significant in my becoming a decent handball player, because he talked to us a lot. He was called the Babe Ruth of team handball. He talked about spiel handball, and he would point to his brain, and then he would demonstrate. So I wanted to give mention to him because he really affected me as a player. How that came about, I mentioned the Cali trial earlier on, and the night that we played in Elkhart Lake and we won, and there was a party afterwards. And at that party, 2 things happened. One was a colonel from the U.S. Army was there, and he was congratulating us as soldiers. And then there was a group of us that were kind of together celebrating, and one of the players that was with me was a little goalie named Tommy Roberts, who never really got much playing time. He was an All-American soccer goalie, about 5'7" or 8, but he had a vertical of about 38 inches, and he was a pretty good goalie. But anyway, he was a little bit of a hippie, even though he had been in the Army. The colonel came up to us and said, "Hey, congratulations. Just want to let you know the Army's going to become all volunteer. We're going to start doing commercials, and we even got this catchphrase, be all that you can be. And we're thinking of using some of you handball players now that you've made the Olympics to help us make these commercials." And there's about a 15-second pause because none of us were excited really about the military at that point. And little Tommy goes, yeah, he says, I think I can do that. He says, but I have one caveat. As long as I can say be all that you can be, and that includes dead. Now, I don't tell that story because I thought it was funny, but it impacted me at the time more than I realized, because it was really a poignant statement that at the time didn't realize the totality of it. Anyway, the other thing that happened was I mentioned the original 7, and you mentioned Rico, who was a very good player. At that party, the 7 kind of pulled off to the side by themselves, and the rest of us were over in a corner, and we were having a good time, and everybody was pretty happy because we'd really made this goal of making it to Munich. Well, all of a sudden, one of the original 7 girlfriends comes over by us and she says, "Do you mind if I party with you guys? You're all happy and excited, and those guys over there are kind of somber." And I don't know what that was about, but again, it was an influence into me. So to kind of wrap up, the Vietnam War, the fact that the Olympics were going through a process of talking about starting to let professional athletes become an automatic part of the Olympics, and kind of the politicization of it all. I grew up with Jim Thorpe and Jesse Owens being heroes, and amateur athletics having this place where they could go and really showcase themselves, even though during the rest of the year they were doing normal things. And that kind of got a little tainted for me. But at the very end, when we won in Elkhart, we got a 2-week break. And being in the Army, if I could find a military flight, I could hitchhike a ride wherever it was going. And then if I got somewhere where there weren't military flights, I kind of liked hitchhiking anyway, then I would hitchhike on the road. Well, I went on this 2-week trip out to California. I got a couple of really cool flights, one in a weather plane, one in a jet with a general, and ended up out in Arizona and was thinking about all the things that I've mentioned. And when I got back, I was unsure whether I wanted to go on because I wasn't really feeling that enthused about it, and the Olympics weren't that significant to me the way I was interpreting it. And what happened was when I got back, they said, "Hey, we're going to go to Europe for one more trip." And it was in April, and I could either go on the trip or go back to my fort and discharge out of the Army. And if I went on the trip, I had to re-up in the Army for some additional time. And everything that I've mentioned weighed heavy on me, and I thought a lot about it. And I said, I really would rather get out of the Army than to go on this trip and distance myself from the Vietnam issue. So that's how I came about making that decision. I went back to Fort Jackson and discharged out of the Army.
Really powerful story. Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, holy cow. I mean, that's something that I don't think any of our, current national team players would ever even have to consider as having to make a decision. It's a no-brainer for them, but when you have to weigh literal life and death kind of situation, it definitely makes it a little bit more challenging. So thank you for the compassionate story there, because that's one that I think will hit home for many of our listeners, as many of them are in that category as well. So I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's the more you hear about the status of where handball's been in this country, the more crazy stories you keep hearing. So
yeah, what a great story, Terry. Thank you.
And these are crazy times coming. Coach McGuire, who I was a walk-on, and then he asked me on the varsity, and it ended up that I was scholastically ineligible. And but anyway, I mention that because one of the things he told me is he'd like to have 2 basketball players and 10 athletes to make up his team. And he told me I was an athlete. At first I was offended. I mean, I can't play that. But anyway, I really was more of an athlete than I was any particular sport. And I found that in team handball, that really helped me. And I just love the game. So I wanted to add that, and I thank you for that time to do that.
Oh, it's the perfect game for athletes. I think you summed it up very
Yep.
nicely there.
And
So,
not
The kind of style of athlete I was.
it was excellent to hear from you.
Well, thank
Excellent.
you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Terry.
I enjoyed talking with you.
Indeed, Terry. Thank you very much.
Take care,
And-
Mark. See you down the road. Peace.
Indeed. Look forward to getting to Jefferson again and seeing you in Laurel. All right, gentlemen, we go now
Take care,
to
guys. Good
our
luck with your bets.
Thank you. We need them.
They're not going to go well.
we go now to our picks, and we we'll see how we do. And we are going to start with our first game tomorrow: Japan versus Germany. And let me get to my two shot here. There we go. Japan versus Germany. Germany favored by 7.5. That one. Okay, our next game.
Bunch of ninjas out there.
From Group B, Slovakia versus Croatia, who is favored by 1.5 points. All right, and moving on to next Group A game, Egypt versus Denmark, and Denmark is favored by 1.5 points.
I'm gonna.
Well, that's hardly burning any barns.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's a couple goals.
He's just not up for any violence like that. All right, men's Group B, Sweden is favored by 1.5 points over Spain.
Mm. Yep. So it was careful. It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be your interesting game of the day.
Interesting
Mark
game of the
it
day.
there.
We got to come up with a better title for that. All right, France favored by 4.5 over Norway.
I'm gonna take France. I'm gonna take France on the spread too. I think they're.
All right.
I think France needs to win though.
All right. I jumped the gun, but here's Argentina versus Hungary in our last game of the day. Hungary favored by 5.5. Quick look at the standings, which you guys can't see, and which I have mislabeled here Group A or Group B, but this is, I believe, Group A, and not as I've labeled Group B. And we see that Sweden has 4 points with a differential of 7.
This is for the women. This is for the women.
This is for the
Yep.
women. So this is summarizing where we stand after today's games. Should have made that clear. So Sweden with a couple of victories. Everybody else is 1-1. Although I missed a
Except
loss.
Germany, who's
Germany,
Yep.
sitting at the bottom of the
Sweden
table.
is on top,
Germany,
Germany's on bottom, everyone else is
surprisingly at the
sandwiched in
bottom with
between.
2 victories and a -4 differential. And if we look, how do I get this to change? It was changing. Oh, I know. Well, I know. I got to do this.
You want me to take us home?
And in the other group, France is up with 4 points, 2 victories. Spain has 2 losses and a -16 goal differential. Brazil
They are
with a 1-1 victory record, but a goal differential of +10. France is +7. So that's where we stand at the end of that day. As we go back to our 4-shot here to close things off, guys, any further thoughts?
Only thing I have is just looking at that Group B real quick. The fact that there's 2 non-European teams in the top 3. It is only after 2 games, but great to see some global diversification in handball. That's what we need. That's what the IOC wants to see. So keep that cruising along. So keep it up, our African and South American allies.
Yeah,
great
someday,
tournament so far. Another great day tomorrow. Can't wait.
someday it may be the USA up there. Gosh, what'll that look like?